Some people cringe at the sound of nails against a chalkboard. Some people cringe at the sound of the mailman dropping off bills that they know their mother can't afford. Some people cringe at the sound of knuckles against skin, and some people cringe at the sound of a buzzer going off at the end of a game they were so determined to win. But me, I cringe at the sound of sirens. Fire trucks and ambulances, their urgency echoing through the streets. You pull over as they rush by, and when they're gone, you move on with your busy day, forgetting about the destination they so desperately need to reach, forgetting there was someone who needed saving, forgetting to wonder if they were able to be saved. Because you don't know, and most of the time you won't know. Most of the time. There was a boy who lived up the street from me. He was my older sister's best friend since before my memories even began. His name is Andrew. I grew up with him, riding bikes into the sunset, pedaling like we actually needed to get somewhere. We had no worries on our shoulders, and if we did, they weren't heavy enough to strain our backs the way they do now. We were only kids, scraped knees and missing teeth, unaware of the hardships we would inevitably face. I never saw Andrew smile as much as he did when things were that simple. I never saw him laugh as genuinely as he did at my unkempt and knotted hair, and how my Disney princess underwear would always peek out of my tomboy basketball shorts when I rode my bright purple bike through the streets that my sisters, Andrew, and I had taken over. It was our kingdom, and no one could touch us. But something changed the day my sister and Andrew started middle school. You see, the other kids started to notice his voice was a little higher, and his walk a little different, and so they laughed. A kind of menacing laughter filled with cruel intentions, a kind of laughter that repeats itself like a broken record as you toss and turn at night and wonder why you were made the wrong way. By 8th grade, rude laughter evolved to mean boys on the block chasing him after school. I watched out my window as Andrew ran in a winnerless race and made his way towards refuge behind my front door. The look on his face made me think perhaps being too different is not something you want attention for. But he grew up, moved on to high school, and I grew up too, understanding now what it means to be gay, but I still don't understand why I was any different than me crushing on the brown-haired boy that sat next to me in the 5th grade. As Andrew grew, he began to embrace the talents he possessed. I remember so vividly the way he'd turn our home into a stadium where his fingers became ballerinas and the professional nutcracker dancing across piano keys with such beauty and grace while he sang with a voice that was full of strength and confidence, rather than a voice full of apathy that I was so accustomed to. And in that moment, so raw and unrestrained, I saw that he opened himself because he had no one to be afraid of. I was nothing short of elated that he finally found something to love. So I grew up. Moved on to college, and I grew up too. I understood hate now, and how it resided inside of people who fear those who are different than them, who love things they don't. But I still didn't understand what compelled people to unknowingly expose their insecurities by attacking others with the hate they harbored, the hate they grasped so tight it's a shame they couldn't replace it with a hand belonging to a lost and broken soul. I always admired Andrew for his individuality. For I've lived a life constantly trying to stay true to my fingerprints, because when I study them, I'm reminded I'm not a copy. And it was Andrew's honesty with himself that made me so determined to just be me. But not everyone felt the same way. You see, my sisters spoke of nights. They would walk downtown. They passed sidewalk strangers who couldn't handle his hair, his shoes, or his unique attire. They threw matches at the dry forest inside of Andrew's heart to start the worst kind of fire. They threw poison at him. Fucking faggot, they said, rolling off their tongues with such ease. It's a shame they're numb to how awful it tastes. Words like that, targeted at someone vulnerable, might as well be missiles, fired with impeccable accuracy from satellites that orbit this Earth, shining bright in the same night sky your worst enemies peer at when they get lonely. Words like this have that ability other words don't. They don't travel into one ear to be let out the other and forgotten like most things. They force themselves uninvited inside your head. They infect your thoughts, and if you think about them long enough, they start to spread. Eventually, they'll infect the optic nerve, fogging your vision. Every time you look in the mirror, the more you hear these words, the worse it gets. Before long, you see something different than everyone else sees. You may even start to hate it. Then you hate it enough to hurt yourself. You hate it because it isn't you anymore. The poisonous words released from the mouths of humans who lack acceptance can distort everything you thought you loved about yourself. It can even ruin your life. So Don't you dare say words will never hurt you, because I'll be damned if all the marks on Andrew's arms didn't hurt like hell. Let me tell you, hurting yourself won't make you more loved, even if it makes people realize you are lacking the support you need. Hating yourself won't make you more beautiful, even if it makes people tell you what you wished you believed about yourself. Now let me tell you, there was nothing beautiful about the burns and cuts covering Andrew's arms from his wrist to his shoulders. His scars were a message written in Braille. They said, there's nothing lovable about hating yourself so much you think you deserve this pain. There's nothing worse than being referred to as that kid who's gay instead of your own name. There's nothing beautiful about wanting to die rather than live a moment longer in your skin. There's nothing worse than being told that who you love is gross, unnatural, and filled with sin. Today, 2 fire trucks and an ambulance, flashing lights and sirens, sped up past my house. I never thought too much of it. I went on with my busy day, forgetting about the destination they so desperately needed to reach, forgetting there was someone who needed saving, and it wasn't till 2 days later I found that Andrew was unable to be saved. How was it only 1 week prior that we sat at my kitchen table, asking about each other's days, not knowing it's the last words you'll ever exchange, not knowing that this chapter in my book titled Andrew had reached its final page, not knowing the mistake in saying see you later rather than goodbye. He can't even know how his death at 19 years old is making so many people cry. He can't even hear my sister screaming that if she hadn't canceled their plans, she would have known. He can't even hear his mother's heart beating out of her chest as her son's body bag is carried out of her own home. I cringe at the sound of sirens because they sound more like misplaced blame and condolences at a funeral that shouldn't have happened, and they sound like Andrew singing, fingers effortlessly dancing across piano keys that I don't even want to touch anymore because they'll never play as beautiful as he did.